affirmative claims that many people do not have job opportunities, so they have to work minimum wage jobs. But we have to take into account that minimum wage jobs weren't designed to be, they were designed to be learning wage positions and not something that's permanent. James Shirk in What is Minimum Wage states that minimum wage positions enable workers to gain the skills necessary to become more productive on the job. As workers become more productive, they command higher pay and move up their career ladder. 2/3 of the minimum wage workers earn a raise within a year, and raising the minimum wage makes such entry positions less available. In effect, sawing off the bottom rung of many workers' career ladders. So the minimum wage basically hurts these workers' career prospects. Which brings me to my next point. A high minimum wage entices people to not want to excel in the workforce and out of poverty. David Henderson in The Negative Effects of Minimum Wage states that economic studies have shown that a higher minimum wage entices some teenage students to drop out. With fewer jobs to go around and a greater number of dropouts, some newer dropouts take jobs from the less educated and lower productivity teens who had already left school. Even worse, the failure to find work early in their lives harms young people later in their lives. For example, economist David Newmark of the Public Policy Institute of California states that even people in their late 20s work less and earn less the longer that they're exposed to higher minimum wages, presumably because the minimum wage destroyed job opportunities early in their work life. The second point that the affirmative claims is that inflation is not necessarily linked to wage increases, and that the more people make, that the more buying power they would have. The affirmative fails to mention that employers raise the price of goods and services in order to compensate for the increased wages of their employees. So in the article, the Congressional Budget Office, in the article, The Effects of a Minimum Wage Increase on Employment and Family Income, states that higher wages increase the cost of employers of producing goods and services. The employers pass some of those increased costs onto the consumers in the form of higher prices, and those higher prices in turn lead to consumers to purchase fewer of the goods and services that are being provided. The employers consequently produce fewer goods and services, so they hire fewer workers. That is known as the scale effect, and it reduces employment among both low-wage workers and higher-wage workers. My second point is that raising the minimum wage leads employers to have to compensate for higher wages by cutting down on their own stuff. They have to compensate for higher prices on the supplies that they have to buy for their own companies. And the Congressional Budget Office states that a minimum wage increase raises the cost of low-wage workers relative to other inputs that employers use to produce goods and services such as machines, technology, and more productive, higher wage workers. The third point that she addresses is that although people still use government-aided programs, raising the minimum wage would allow people to survive on their own by raising the minimum wage. And I want to state that raising the minimum wage inaccurately targets the people it's meant to help and give buying power to. Heather Bowsey in Understanding Low-Wage Work in the United States reveals that the poverty threshold that is used to determine the required minimum wage to survive is oftentimes not matched or barely matched to the cost of living. The author, Bowsey, explains that the poverty threshold is used by researchers and government officials to define low-wage work, and states that changes in our social structure and household expenses have rendered the formula nearly useless as an objective measure of the income necessary to meet basic consumption needs. So basically, in other words, that any change in our in the social structure or family structure, such as like divorce, can lead families out of the can like exclude them out of that formula, so like in such unseen events. The people who work in minimum wage jobs are not attempting to support the. My second point is that people that work minimum wage jobs aren't attempting to support themselves or a family. James Shirk states that in 2011 and 2012, 3.7 million Americans reported earning $7.25 or less per hour. Only 2.9% of all those workers of the United States. So that's just only 3% of the United States, and of those workers, of that 3%, there's only two categories that really there's only two types of categories that fall into those minimum wage jobs, which is younger workers, usually in school, or older workers who have left school. Most minimum wage earners fall into the first category, which is just over half between the ages 16 and 24, and the rest are 25 years or older. He also states that minimum wage workers tend to live in middle class households that do not rely on their earnings. Their average family income exceeds $65,000 a year. Sorry, my time's up.